This is Nicholas Alexiou from the Hellenic American Project and in the Department of Sociology, Queen's College, CUNY. And this is an interview with the writer, Yanni Theodorakatos, John Theodorakatos. Yanni, John, thank you very much for accepting our invitation to have this interview and discuss your book, which is a very interesting book. I always find it fascinating and difficult for me personally to write a children's book. Thank you very much for being here today with the Hellenic American Project.
Thank you very much for having me. It's my pleasure and an honor to be here and to share my book with you all and to talk about that. Very excited.
John, tell me, growing up in a Greek American environment, you knew some Greek authors, some Greek American authors, or some American authors that you got some inspiration?
Unfortunately, I did not know any Greek American authors, and I had no inspiration on that aspect. However, I was always a very creative kid. I always used my imagination. And when I was a kid, I wanted to do theater. I wanted to be an actor. So I studied for a little bit and I begged my parents to help me pursue that. But it didn't go very far. Unfortunately, it's a very tough field, as we all know. So I was always writing. As a young kid, I remember even when I was 12 years old, I had started writing a screenplay for a movie, I believe, that I wanted to do. So I was always writing and things would always just come to me in my head. I had a very active imagination. So I just always loved to write. And I was inspired by everything, by TV shows that I watched, books that I read, movies I saw in the film industry. So I was inspired by quite many things. Yeah.
And also, tell us about how do you write? What is the writing process? You write with a pencil and paper in the computer during the day, late at night?
You know, it usually varies. So I have to feel when I'm writing, especially because I'm writing children's books, and this is my first book that I wrote, and it's a fictional story. However, it has elements of reality to it. So I really have to escape and I have to go there. And I have to feel, for me, when I'm writing, I'm in a place of such anonymity and nobody knows what I'm doing. And I really don't like to talk about my process when I'm writing and when I'm creating these stories and these characters, because I want them to be a surprise. And I want to feel like nobody knows what I'm doing and I'm sort of secluded from everything else. And usually I write at night. Sometimes if something comes to me, an inspiration, I will take a little bit of time during the day and I'll write. It just varies on how my energy is. There are times when I can go a week without writing anything because I'm just not feeling inspired. And if I'm not feeling inspired, I just rather not work at all than write something that's not going to be up to par with what I know it could be when I'm feeling such inspiration in my imagination. And sometimes I will be on my computer writing, and that's where I typically write and the manuscript starts. However, there are times when I'm at work or I'm just on the train and I just happen to have pen and paper and I'll just write something down and then I'll go and I'll update it later on my manuscript. And that's typically my process. But the most important thing is to just feel inspired when I am writing.
How long it took you to write this particular book? Tell us the title first of all.
Yeah, absolutely. So the title to my first children's book is Johnny and His Flying Blanket. And believe it or not, it took me about 4.5 weeks only to write the entire book. Now, I made edits and revisions and I altered things. However, the bulk of the story came so effortlessly to me because it was based on a childhood memory and an experience that I had. So it was very much a free-flowing sort of process. And even the characters are based off kids that I went to school with. Even the names, or some of them are kids that I knew. So I took reality and what I had experienced as a child, and I just incorporated that into this sort of lavish, whimsical story. So it didn't take that long. From I've spoken to other authors and they said, oh, wow, that was pretty quick. But it just came to me. I've had it in my head, sort of, festering for so long. And to finally put it down, it just poured out naturally, which was just, it was a beautiful organic experience.
Do you write while you are at home, or you go to retreats, writers' retreats, places where people go for workshops and they're isolated and sit down and write? How?
I think I may have to do that for my next book because now there's expectation and I'm no longer anonymous. But for this first one, I was fortunate enough because it was during COVID and I was working remote from home. So I was able to work and create the book while I was working from home. So that's how I wrote it basically. While I was in my house, I was able to put it together. And that's really what triggered it. COVID actually inspired the book because I've had it in my head for so many years. And for some reason, I was always procrastinating and putting it off and putting it off. And I would tell people, oh, I have this book and, here's the premise. I have a story in my head. They're like, oh, that sounds, it's a cute story. You should think about writing it. And I said, during COVID, let me just write it and see what happens. Let me just tell the story. And it just poured out of me.
Okay. All right. So you sat down, you finished the manuscript. And then what? It is a series of other things that play a role in producing the final product.
Absolutely.
What do you do with the manuscript? Is any Greek American agency that help you, or you have to go to the General American Society? How you made those decisions?
This was all new to me because it's my first book and I self-published. So I was starting from scratch. I didn't have a sort of, prototype or something that I could look to really and compare myself to and work off of that. So once the manuscript is done, you're right, it is a process. And then that's when the work starts because I'm also writing a children's book. So I need illustrations. So the first thing I did was I went and I looked for illustrators that I felt could bring my vision to life. And that is a very daunting task. And it's, very sort of an arduous journey that you have to sort of go on because I was getting so many people saying, oh, I can do this for you, I can do that for you. But for some reason, it just wasn't working. And then I met a team and they're called QBN Studios and they're based in Connecticut. I saw their work and I loved what they had done for other publishers for other children's books. And we decided to work together. And from the beginning, I knew they were going to bring my book to life. And I felt they just completely took my ideas and my vision and these characters and brought them to life in such a beautiful way. And that took the bulk of the process. That took about maybe 9 to 10 months, the illustrations, because it is a lot of back and forth and do this, change that. Because as a visionary, as somebody who has this story in my head and I know what these characters look like, I can't draw, I can't put it down on paper, but I can visualize in my head, I can see what it looks like. So I would tell them, this is what I'm thinking. I would take photos of, sunsets or buildings. And I would say, this is what I'm kind of thinking of. This is what I want this to look like. So it's quite a bit of a process, but in the end, they did a miraculous job and I can't wait to work with them again. So it was that process. And then there's also the editing process because I'm writing. And of course, I try to be proper and to not have grammatical errors when I'm writing. But at the same time, my main focus is to more so tell the story and convey the message and get that out there. I'm not really thinking, should there be a semicolon here? Should there be a comma there? So that's why you need a good editor who will sort of clean up your story for you. So once the illustrations were done and my book was professionally edited by my fantastic editor, Kelly Ann Gonzalez, I should also mention, it was just the process of marrying the book together, the illustrations with the manuscript and sort of tying in the story with the illustrations. And that takes maybe about a month as well too. So I would say the whole process took close to about a year from initial, thinking about the book to its, execution and being completely done.
And what about distribution now? Because this is another aspect of the whole chain, right? So you have the product, you're very pleased with that, you see your achievement, and now it has to be disseminated. How the distribution? A story, unfortunately, has from 0 to 1 or 2 bookstores. How how
I
you bring,
know.
how you bring your book to the people?
Book to the people. That is a very good question. So I self-published and I went through Amazon because I felt Amazon is such a huge organization
Mhm.
that people more or less feel safe with. We all order things from Amazon. It's reputable. And they do offer self-publishing, and a lot of people have self-published with success. So I felt that was the best avenue for me to go down. So I went, and that's how my book gets distributed and reaches the people, the masses. However, in terms of promotion and marketing, because the book itself, I should mention, takes place in Queens, New York. I mean, you have the cover up right there, and I thank you. And if you know people that are from Astoria, they may know that is Astoria Park. That's the Hell's Gate Bridge, that's the water. And I wanted to keep that in my book because that's where I grew up, and that's how the story came to be. So I wanted it to have the cover, which is the most important part of the book. They tell you the cover is your selling point. It's what's going to make the kid gravitate towards it and want to buy it when they look at it. So I knew from the beginning I wanted that to be the backdrop of the cover. And in terms of marketing, I did want to sort of market it to the Greek community. And I was able to go do a book reading at a local school, a Greek American school, private school, and read to fantastic children about my book. And they really received it well and they loved it. And I've also advertised to the Greek community online via Facebook and social media because it's important. Because I found when promoting it, people, the Greek community was very accepting. Oh, you know, you're a Greek American author, you know, you're a young guy, you did something very fantastic, and that's great. And they were being really supportive of me. And that to me is what community is, and your culture. You know, we're always there for each other. We build each other up, we support each other. So I found acceptance within the Greek community just promoting it on social media.
Interesting. Also, you know, from what you just mentioned is about 2 years of struggling with a blank page, with people who do the graphics, with editors. So it let's say that you want to give an advice to a person who wants to write a book, or is in the process to write a book. What do you, from what you experience and know now, what it is that you pay more attention and try to avoid? What is your advice to a new writer that wants to start his or her first book?
The first thing I would tell them is to just go for it, because even just promoting my book, I met people my age, older than me, younger than me, who are thinking about writing, and they're maybe a little bit unsure if they can do it now, if it's too late. And I said, look, it's never too late. I said, I just released my first book and I'm in my 30s, and there really is no sort of cap on when you can do something. So if someone is interested in writing, the first thing I would tell them is to just go for it, not think about anything, depending on what you're writing, not think about any outside barriers, anybody blocking you. Just sit down, tell your story your way, convey the message you want to convey, and just put it down to pen and paper. And that's where you start from. The rest will all fall into place. But initially, just go and tell the story you want to tell, and make sure you're truthful to what you're saying and you're doing it for the right reasons. That's the most important thing I would tell somebody. And to also just be prepared and know it's going to be a long process, and to have that in mind when you're creating the book and when you're going through the process. I always say it's hard, but you have to sort of see the end in the beginning. You have to sort of be able to visualize what the outcome is going to be while you're in the early stages, and that will keep you going. Because there were moments I had when I said, oh, let me just not do this anymore, let me put it away. I would get frustrated, maybe nothing will come from it. And I didn't do that though. I persevered and I pressed through, and I'm happy I did. And now my book is out and I couldn't be happier, but it is a process. But initially, if anybody is trying to write, I would just say, go for it, put your ideas down, and don't let anybody stop you. Don't think about it. Just write what you want to write.
Was the family and your friends supportive of your attempt?
Oh, absolutely. I have to say, at one point, I was speaking to my mom, and my mom is a traditional Greek lady. So, I come from the generation where it was, be a doctor, be a lawyer, those sort of professions that are, those were the pinnacles. So one day I was on the phone with her and I told her, I said, oh, I'm writing. She's like, what are you writing? And I said, oh, I'm writing a book. I have this idea in my head for a year. She's like, you never told me that, because I had not told her. In all fairness, I never brought it up. And she's like, that's amazing. And she would want to be, kept up to date with what's going on with the characters. And my best friend in particular, Irene, when I would write something, I would tell her, oh, I just wrote this. And she says, well, what's going to happen next? And I said, well, I'm not there yet. This is where I ended. She's like, that's a cliffhanger. I said, I know, but I haven't finished it yet. I don't know what's going to happen, because I really didn't know. I knew some of the story in my head, but then the rest just came naturally to me. So I was sort of, as I was writing, these storylines were coming to me and I was improvising and it just fell into place. But they were very supportive. My friends, they said, oh my gosh, I can't wait to hear the end, and, keep going. So, and that's a very important thing. I think a good support system is also, it keeps you going and it fuels your inspiration.
Before you start reading parts of your book and telling us things, I would like to tell us how you decided to write a children's book, because as I said, I think is one of the most difficult things. It's more difficult than writing a novel or history, etc. Writing for why children's book?
Yeah, I think for me, it was a natural choice to write children's books, because I sometimes, believe it or not, still feel like a kid. I still have the same imagination and that creative energy that I had when I was maybe 11, 12 years old, which is what the characters are in the book. They're 11. So for me, that was just the route that I was going to take, because I love coming up with these lavish stories and sort of seeing what my mind will conjure up. And I feel I have a connection to kids. I love kids. I feel like I relate to them on a certain level. And I love telling stories that I feel kids and children will appreciate. I remember as a kid when I first read Harry Potter, and I was just completely floored with this fantastic tale that J.K. Rowling created, and these characters and the story, magic, mystery. And that's really what I wanted to tell. I wanted it to be fantasy and fiction with a little bit of reality, while incorporating real life themes that all kids go through, but telling it through a sort of, fictional story. I feel that's where my strong points are. I am able to sort of, conjure up these great sort of, wild situations, and it comes from my love of movies from a young age, and literature, and sort of, television, and watching certain shows that inspired me. I love, the land of magic and all those things. And I feel like that's where I'm suited for. And that's really where my passion lies.
I read your book and I enjoyed it very much.
Thank
And
you.
as a sociologist by training and what I do, but also as a citizen, as a person, you're dealing with a very serious topic and a very serious social problem, which is bullying. Uh, how you talk to children about this thing?
It's a very tough thing. And I have to admit to you that when I wrote the book, initially, I just thought that I had a cute, fun story that kids will like. And along the duration of writing the book, the tone changed and my thinking about the book changed. I realized that it wasn't just about writing a fun story. I started thinking about things I experienced as a child and things that I went through, and that all came back to me. And I realized the importance of conveying messages like bullying, friendship, self-acceptance, diversity, all these things in my book, while still having it be fun and a feel-good story, but also a story that shows kids, look, you're not the only one going through this. The characters in the book are going through this. I've gone through this, and I truly have. So that's why I wanted to incorporate that. And when I talk to kids about, you mentioned bullying, which is one of the topics, the themes in the book, it's very important. And I just did a reading of my book, and I told kids, bullying, we all know what it means more or less. It's, when you make fun of somebody, when you push somebody around. And the thing that I specify to them is, oh, and it's a lot harder now. I mean, because of social media, it's all over the place. It's in your face all the time. You can't hide from bullying when you leave school, unfortunately, anymore. The bullies follow you online. I just tell them it has less to do with you and more to do with them. And oftentimes they're insecure about something and they feel better about themselves by taking it out on you. Or believe it or not, they see something in you that they idolize or they wish they had, and they could be jealous of that. And the important thing is to just talk to somebody about it, because I was afraid to talk about my bullying when I was a kid in junior high, because sometimes there is a sense of shame and embarrassment wrapped around that. And that can be a sort of, scary, dangerous thing, because you tragic stories about what happens to kids. They don't talk about bullying until it's too late, and no kid should ever have to endure that. And I also point out to them, just always feel good enough. All of us, more or less, we always have that one friend that is going to be there for us, and know that there is somebody there that sort of supports you and appreciates you for who and what you are. And I have to say, for me, in my case, and I tell kids this, I was bullied in junior high quite a bit. But when I would leave, I would always have, fortunately, and I don't know where this came from, but I'm blessed that I had this mindset. I always remember thinking, well, it's not me, it's them. And this is making them feel better, but it has nothing to do with me. And then when I would go home, I would be happy, I would be great. I would lose myself in these TV shows that I would watch and would make me feel better about myself. These characters that made me feel okay to be different. So that's what I want kids to know, that there's nothing wrong with them, and it will eventually go away. It will. And they just have to stay strong and speak up about it. But it's a tough thing. It's a very tough thing.
Why you don't start, introducing to the book and read something there and tell us things? I would like to hear, to document your voice reading your own book.
Absolutely. So this is my first ever book that I published, and it's Johnny and His Flying Blanket, written by me and illustrated by QBN Studios. And I will read a little bit of it, and we can explore some of the themes in here that I feel are relevant. It was a cold and quiet December morning in a small suburb of Queens, New York, when Johnny woke up early with a tickle in his throat. He normally wakes up early for school, as he is always eager to be the first one there. This particular morning, however, he felt a little sluggish. Johnny is short for his age, with wavy black hair and a space between his teeth. This doesn't make Johnny very popular. He does, however, thrive in his school's theater program, which was holding auditions for the upcoming play. Believing he can make himself feel better, he gets up, puts on his favorite pair of faded ripped jeans, a green flannel shirt, and his white canvas sneakers. A few minutes later, Johnny's mom, Faye, walks in, as she heard him coughing just moments earlier. His mom is a hardworking single parent, and little Johnny is her whole world. Just like every other day, she is already dressed for work in her waitress uniform, with her short blonde hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. "Are you okay?" she asks. She feels his head to take his temperature. She looks at Johnny and tells him he will be staying home because he has a fever and it would only get worse with the cold temperatures outside. Well, Johnny is very upset by this news, because he now realizes there is no chance that he will get to try out for the school play. He begs and pleads with his mom, but she says to him, nope, the only place you're going to is bed. To comfort Johnny, his mom takes his favorite action figures and surrounds him with them to bring him joy. Next, she goes to the kitchen and makes him toast with strawberry jam, a tall glass of orange juice, and to make it extra fancy, she places it on a stool with a white tablecloth and a little vase with a flower in it, so Johnny can feel like he's at a restaurant. So I have to stop here for a minute and just show you, because this is the illustration of little Johnny. And really, this is the whole premise of how the book came to me. When I was a kid and I was sick, what my mom would do was she would take my comforter off the bed and she would put it on the floor facing the TV, and she would make like a little fortress with my toys so I could watch TV and feel safe and sort of make it fun for me. And she would even, to make it feel like I was at a restaurant so I could eat my soup, she would take a stool, put a white tablecloth and a little vase with a flower to make it fancy for me. So that's why it was important for me to have that in here, because it's something my mom did for me. So that's how the story really was originated in my head. It started from that memory of me as a kid, and that's where the story starts. Well, after Johnny falls asleep, he suddenly awakens, what feels like minutes, unaware he had even fallen asleep. Johnny is on top of his blanket where he was, only now he feels a cold breeze blowing at his face. A few moments later, he realizes that he is floating in the air above the clouds. He can see the playground by his school and the candy store where he gets his snacks from. Then he sees his house, and his first instinct is to go back home. But by now, Johnny is having way too much fun, and he wants to go tell his friends about his new flying blanket. He makes a sharp turn and heads for school. Still high enough off the ground to where he is not visible by the people below, he only starts to come down when he is above the empty playground. Once he lands, he walks towards the back window of his history class, where he knows Bonnie will be at this time. Bonnie has been Johnny's best friend since they were 3 years old. She always sticks up for him when something happens, and she is always there for him. She has flowing red curls that are pulled back with headbands. Her style is fiery, just like she is. So this is really, a kid asked me about the book and about bullying. And they said, well, why didn't you show, actions or depict bullying in your book? And I said, at the end of the day, I don't want to depict that with the illustrations because I felt it would be too harsh and it wouldn't be pleasant for kids to see that. So what I wanted to do was, through wording and phrasing, I wanted to talk about Johnny being different. So I mentioned that he's short, he has a space between his teeth, and that doesn't make him very popular. And then here, I say Bonnie always sticks up for him when something happens, therefore implying that he can't defend himself maybe, or stick up for himself, so his best friend does. So you kind of have to read between the lines a little bit, but I thought it was important to sort of convey that message and show it along those ways, which I thought was great. And the kids really seem to appreciate that aspect of it, instead of seeing a quick photo of somebody being kicked down, which is never really fun. So as he goes to Bonnie and he tells her, I flew here to school on this blanket. I was home, and the next thing I knew, I was floating above the clouds. Do you think she believes him? She doesn't. Bonnie proceeds to walk back into her classroom. Halfway back, she feels terrible about hurting Johnny's feelings. She knows how sensitive he is, and after all, he is her best friend. She goes back outside to see if he's still there, and what does she see? Little Johnny flying on his blanket above the playground. She's shocked at this point. She gets on the blanket with him, totally afraid of what could happen, but excited at the same time that he wasn't lying to her. And they start flying. He tells her, take out your phone. We're going to text our friends and we're going to go get them. Well, on their way to get Medina and Adriel, their two other best friends, they pick them up. They're flying around and having the time of their lives. They realized something. They realized that all of them, except for Johnny, were in school. So they were going to get in trouble now for cutting class. They were all scared. Johnny, we should be getting back. They could report us for cutting. Bonnie says to him, yeah, I agree this was fun, but we should get back, Medina says. Realizing the right thing to do is to take everyone back, Johnny nods to show agreement with his friends. He did not really want the day to end though. Aside from the theater program at school, it was the most fun he had ever had. For the first time, he felt special, like he had a purpose and something that made him stand out from the other kids who thought he was strange. If only Johnny knew how special he really was and that his friends thought he was truly amazing. So this is another theme that I wanted to explore with the book, the importance of self-acceptance. And when I talk to kids, the younger ones didn't know what self-acceptance was. So I had to break it down for them and let them know about confidence. But it's so important for kids, I feel, whether they get it from their family or from school, sports, activities, whatever they do, self-acceptance in what you do and that you can do something great and nobody else can really do it like you is so important. As a kid, even though I was bullied and I was picked on, and believe it or not, I didn't have very much confidence, there was something inside of me that felt special. Even if I didn't show it to people, there was something in me that said, okay, you're talented in this way, or you can do this. Or even just thinking in my own head, there were things that I wanted to do, to write, to act, to do all these things. I knew I had something inside of me that made me stand out. And I think kids need to sort of tap into that energy and not lose sight of that. So that's another theme that I wanted to sort of showcase here and talk to kids about. Well, on their way back to school, something happened they weren't expecting. A big snowstorm that came out of nowhere. A big gust of wind blew them backwards, turned them upside down and up again. They didn't know what was going on, but they were dangling there in midair. As you can see from right here. The kids love that one. Wondering what they're going to do? Never fear, I have a plan, Johnny says. See that weeping willow tree behind the fire station? We can land on top of it and slowly climb down branch by branch, Johnny tells them. Well, what do you know? The plan worked. They landed safely on the weeping willow tree and they started coming down branch by branch, just like Johnny predicted. As they're walking down, Johnny thought to himself, today was so crazy and special, I still can't believe what happened. The truth is, it was only great because you were there to share it with me, he tells his friends. As Bonnie and Medina made their way across the street and back to school, Johnny went the opposite way to start going back home. While he was walking back, he thought about the events of the day and how they made him feel. For the first time, he felt powerful and needed. He also realized how much his friends really cared for him and how much he cared for him. He didn't need to pretend to be something else in front of them. He could let his guard down and trust them with his secret. That was something that put a smile on Johnny's face. So this is nearing the end of the book now, and this is probably the most poignant part of the book and what the book is more or less about. It's a story about friendship at the end of the day and the importance of having your friends. As kids, the bonds you build with your friends and your community around you are the strongest, and they're going to be with you if you're lucky enough for years. I can say that I have a handful of friends from a young child till this day, which is super important, and more so from my community where I grew up as a Greek American boy in Queens. We still keep in touch. We still see each other. And, you know, to a certain degree, we still feel like those kids from years ago that we grew up together. And that's what I tell kids when I read them my book. I say, cherish your friendships, respect each other, be there for each other. Because as you get older, you're going to rely on each other more and you're going to need each other. And most of them get it and they have their friends. But that was really the message that I wanted to convey in the book, along with everything else. But universally, it's about friendship. And throughout my other books, I mean, I will always want to incorporate that, the power of friendship, because a lot of people, their friends are their families as well, too. And that's a very important thing. So to have that sort of relationship and the person you can go to and be your everything is super important. And I wanted to showcase that, how much they really cared for each other in the book. Well, as we're nearing the end of Johnny and his flying blanket, Johnny crawled back up his window and in his bed where his mom left him this morning. He realized something though. He realized that in his dream state of mind, he must have awoken something in the blanket to transport him from the room to the sky. He thought about how when he goes to sleep at night, he dreams about being something else or being someone great like the action heroes he watches on television that can really fly and save the day. Well, Johnny may not have saved the day, but he sure made his friend's day. And now, just like the good guys on television, Johnny can go anywhere. So as he climbed up his window and back in his bedroom, something else made him smile. The thought that this is just the beginning, and where he and his friends go next is limitless. To the moon and back, he thought. We can go to the moon and back. And that is the ending of Johnny and his flying blanket. I gave a little sneak peek of it. But another message that sort of was important to me that I didn't think about, I guess subconsciously was in my head, was a story about escaping reality and the flying blanket. Yes, it actually happened. It's a fictional story, but it can also be taken in a sort of metaphorical way of, wanting to escape your reality because you're not happy in your everyday life. So you sort of lose yourself in your TV shows or your action heroes like little Johnny does. And that's what triggered his blanket. So I thought that was another important message that kids will definitely be able to relate to.
Very positive messages, and in a very important way also, because you don't want to hit very hard with heavy words and heavy images, as you said.
Absolutely.
I'm glad you avoided the violence images, because it doesn't pay. It does. We live already in a very violent society, and I think your book came out at a very critical moment, at a very critical time. From what I'm reading in different scientific journals and all official data, so an increase in violence among children, and also due to the COVID and other related issues there, with the lockdown and the isolation, and incredible increase in psychological problems children have, and in bullying, of course, and unfortunately,
insecurities, lack of confidence, so many issues arose.
And the worst of all, an increase in suicide rates for among children. So the book came with this, many strong messages at a very good, at a very critical moment, and I think this is kudos to you. Thank you very much, John THEODORAKATOS. Thank you very much for reading for the Hellenic American Project and presenting
my pleasure.
marvelous work. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be here and to read my book and to connect with you. Thank you.